They mocked the waitress for her accent 12 hours later. The mafia boss shut down the restaurant. Port Halcyon, New Jersey, is a city that never quite washes clean. The late autumn rain was doing its best, hammering the pavement until the streets ran with the reflected light of flickering neon. A sign for a bail bonds office sputtered red, then green, then nothing. Out on the docks, the air was thick with the smell of diesel, salt, and old fish. The rain wasn't a cleansing, it was a varnish, sealing in the grime. Inside the docklight grill, it was too bright and smelled of burnt coffee and stale grease. This was my stage. Every night from 6 p.m. until close, the sole of my left shoe had a hole in it, a small one, but big enough for the damp to seep in. For 5 hours, my sock had been a cold, wet bandage against my skin. The roof leaked, too, a steady drip, 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 into a yellow bucket by the jukebox, a counter rhythm to the failing 70s rock song playing too loud. My name is Lila Navar. My hands were rough, the palms etched with lines from carrying trays heavy with chipped porcelain. When I spoke, the island I came from came with me. My English was good, I knew it was, but it was painted with the music of my home, a softer, rounded sound that Port Halcyon found strange. Tonight, the men in Booth 4 found it hilarious. There were 3 of them, locals who worked the containers, smelling of the harbor and cheap whiskey. They'd been loud since they walked in, but their focus had narrowed to me. "Hey, Sugar Plum," one of them called, his voice a gravel pit. "Bring us another round, and say it for us. Will you say?" 3 more tall boys. I kept my back to them, refilling a ketchup bottle. "Right away, sir." See that?" Another one laughed, a high-pitched wheeze. "It's like she's singing at us. Where you from again, darling Coconut Land?" I squeezed the ketchup bottle. A dollop of red splattered the neck. I didn't look at them. I didn't look at my manager, Brent Hollow, who was leaning against the pass-through window, a dish rag in his hand and a smirk on his face. Brent loved this part. He found the grit of the world amusing, especially when it was stuck to someone else. My jaw ached from clenching it. This job, this leaky, greasy room, was the bridge. On one side was my brother, back home, who needed money for medicine. On the other was my future, the night classes in English composition I was saving for. This humiliation was the toll, so I swallowed the anger. It tasted like cold grease. My insides felt wound tight. A clock spring cranked 1 turn too many. I turned, the practiced, empty smile fixed on my face. 3 more beers, coming. As I moved toward the bar, I passed the man at the far end. He had been there for an hour, nursing 1 glass of water. He hadn't touched the menu. He was a whisper in the loud room. His suit was gray, charcoal, and perfect. It had no logo, no brand I could see. It just fit him like a second skin. His tie was loosened just enough to suggest he was off the clock, but not careless. He was watching. Not me, not the men in booth 4. He was watching the whole room, his eyes moving with an unnerving stillness, like he was assessing the pulse of the building itself. I got the beers, the bottles cold and slick against my palms. I navigated the floor, my wet shoe making a small, squeaking sound. "Here you go, gentlemen." As I set the last bottle down, the one who'd called me Sugar Plum lurched, his elbow catching me hard in the ribs. It wasn't an accident. I stumbled, the heavy-duty coffee pot in my other hand, the one I'd been bringing to refresh table 7, went flying. Scalding black coffee arced through the air. It hit the floor, the table, and the front of the man's jacket. He roared, jumping back more in theatrical anger than in pain. "You clumsy bitch." The diner went quiet, the jukebox clicked, starting a new song that no one heard. Lila Brent's voice was a whip crack. He threw the dish rag into the sink and stormed over, his face flushed with managerial fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You assaulted a customer." He pushed me," I stammered, the heat rising in my own face. My apron was soaked. "I don't care what he did. Look at this mess. You apologize. Apologize to Mr. Henderson right now, and you're paying for his dry cleaning. You understand me." The men were loving it. Their laughter was back. Louder this time. I was the floor show. I looked at Henderson, his face a mask of smug indignation. Apologize. My throat closed. The money for my brother, the night classes. I took a breath. I'm very sorry, sir. It was an accident. Damn right it was, Henderson grunted, wiping at his sleeve. Clean it up. Lila, now, Brent pointed at the floor, then stalked back to his perch. I knelt, the shards of the broken pot sharp under my knees. My hands were shaking. The hot coffee had splashed my wrist, and a red welt was already rising. She needs a clean towel for that. The voice was new. It was quiet, calm, and cut right through the lingering laughter. I looked up. The man in the gray suit was standing beside the booth. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Brent. Excuse me, Brent said, his smirk faltering. The stranger walked to the bar, grabbed a stack of clean white service towels from the shelf, and walked back. He dropped one onto the table in front of Henderson. Then he held one out to me. I stared at it. He didn't move until I took it, my fingers brushing his. His skin was dry and warm. He turned his full attention to Brent. His voice was polite, almost conversational. Brent, that's what your name tag says? Tell me, Brent, where do you keep your occupational safety logs? The incident report forms for when an employee is injured on the job. Brent scoffed, trying to regain his footing. Who the hell are you, the coffee police? That's a nasty burn she has, the man continued, his tone unchanged, as if Brent hadn't spoken. He nodded at my wrist. You'll want to document that. I'm also curious about your sanitation grade. I didn't see it posted by the door. That's a city ordinance, isn't it? Get the hell out of my restaurant, Brent said, his voice rising. This is a private conversation. It stopped being private when you yelled at her in front of 20 people. The man's politeness was thinning, revealing something hard and cold beneath. It was like a thin sheet of ice over a black, deep lake. He reached into his breast pocket. For a second, the room held its breath. He pulled out a small, simple business card. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock with plain black lettering. He placed it on the counter, next to the cash register. Baresi, he said. Orpheum Syndicate, Community Relations. Brent stared at the card. The name Orpheum hung in the air, sucking the sound out of the room. Even the men in booth 4 had gone silent. The Orpheum Syndicate wasn't just a name. It was the city's shadow government. And Community Relations was the most terrifying title of all. It was the department that handled problems, permanently. Brent's face had gone from red to a pasty white. The man, Baresi, looked back at me. I was still on the floor, surrounded by coffee grounds and broken glass. Get up, he said. It wasn't a suggestion. I stood up, pulling the wet, sticky fabric of my apron away from my skin. I started gathering the larger pieces of glass. As I turned to take them to the trash, Henderson, the man from the booth, made one last move. Maybe it was the whiskey. Maybe he was stupid. He reached into his pocket and flicked something hard. A coin, a quarter. It spun through the air and struck my wrist, right on the burn. I cried out, a small, sharp sound, and dropped the glass. Before the coin could hit the floor, Baresi's hand shot out. He didn't lunge. He simply intercepted it, catching it between his first 2 fingers as if he'd been waiting for it. The speed was shocking. He stood still for a moment, looking at the quarter. Then he looked at Henderson. The mask of politeness was gone. His eyes were dark, flat, and utterly devoid of mercy. The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. Henderson, who had been laughing a second before, looked like he'd just seen a ghost. He physically shrank back into the vinyl cushions of the booth. Baresi didn't say a word to him. He didn't have to. He calmly pocketed the quarter, then turned to me. The menace evaporated when his eyes met mine, replaced by something else. Something I couldn't name. My whole body was shaking. My wrist was throbbing. Tears burned the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Thank you, I whispered, my voice trembling so badly I could barely hear myself. Franco Baresi looked at me, really looked at me. For a long second, he saw the wet shoe, the cheap apron, the burn, and the fight I was trying to hide. He spoke, his voice low, meant only for me. "After your shift, wait for me on the porch, not alone." He turned, not waiting for a reply, and walked out of the docklight grill. The small bell above the door gave a polite, cheerful jingle as it closed behind him, leaving me in a room full of sudden, absolute silence. The rest of the shift was a funeral. Brent didn't speak to me. The men in booth 4 paid in cash and left without making eye contact. The other customers finished their meals in hurried silence. The only sound was the clatter of plates and the relentless drumming of the rain. At 2:15 a.m., I untied the damp, sour-smelling apron. I clocked out, the machine grinding out a timestamp I knew Brent would edit later. I pushed open the back door. The alley smelled overpoweringly of the fryer grease bin, a heavy, rancid odor that clung to my hair and clothes. The rain was colder now. The back porch was just a concrete slab with a corrugated tin roof that did a poor job of stopping the leaks. The street beyond the alley was empty, washed in the sick yellow of the sodium lamps. My heart was a fist, pounding against my ribs. Half of me was terrified he had left. The other half was terrified he had stayed. He stayed. He was standing just outside the narrow overhang, letting the rain mist his gray suit, but he seemed immune to it. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was just waiting. When the door clicked shut behind me, he turned. His eyes found mine in the darkness. He stepped under the light. He was holding two things. First, a thin, dark gray jacket, much finer than anything I owned. Second, a bottle of electrolyte water. "You're late," he said. It wasn't an accusation, just a fact. He held out the jacket. "You're shivering." I hesitated. "I can't. It's alone." He didn't wait for me to take it. He draped it over my shoulders. The wool was high quality, impossibly warm, and smelled faintly of cedar and something metallic, like clean steel. He pushed the bottle into my hand. "Drink. You're dehydrated." I looked at the bottle, then at him. "Why are you doing this?" He ignored the question and nodded at my wrist, which I was clutching against my stomach. "How's the burn?" I uncurled my fingers. The red welt from the coffee was ugly, but the mark from the quarter was worse, a perfect, angry circle. "It stings." "He'll pay for that," Franco Baresi said. It was another statement of fact, delivered with the same finality as the rain. "You shouldn't have interfered," I said, my voice small but sharp. "You made it worse. Brent will fire me tomorrow." "He won't," said Franco. "He has bigger problems. You don't belong in there." "You don't know anything about me." "I know what I see," he said, his gaze fixed on the overflowing dumpster across the alley. "I see someone working for less than minimum wage in a place that violates half a dozen health codes. I see someone who takes it because they have no other choice." He finally looked at me. "What's the choice?" "Lila Navar." My name on his lips was a shock. Brent must have yelled it. "My brother," I said, the word torn out of me. "Back home. And school." "What school?" "It sounds stupid." "Try me." "Culinary school," I whispered. "The Halcyon Institute. I want to cook. I don't want to serve." I clutched the water bottle. I almost got a scholarship, the New American Dream Grant, but I was missing paperwork, immigration technicalities. They said my file was incomplete. So, here I am, serving burnt coffee to drunks. He listened. He didn't nod, didn't offer sympathy. He just listened, his focus absolute. It felt like he was memorizing every word, filing it away in a cold, precise cabinet in his mind. The silence stretched, filled only by the dripping water. A sound cut through the rain, laughter, drunken, familiar. Down the alley, near the parking lot, two figures emerged from the fog. Henderson and his friend. They were leaning on each other, stumbling. "Hey, look," Henderson yelled, pointing at us. "It's the singing waitress and her boyfriend." My blood went cold. I took a step back. my shoulders hitting the brick wall of the diner. "Leave her alone," Franco said. His voice didn't rise, but it carried. "Or what, suit?" the other man sneered. He fumbled with something at his feet, then straightened up. "She liked you. Huh, thinks you're a big shot." He drew his arm back and threw. I flinched. Hard. An empty beer bottle cartwheeled through the air. It didn't hit us. It struck the wall about 3 feet to my left and exploded. A shower of green glass and stale beer sprayed across the concrete. A shard stung my cheek, drawing a pinprick of blood. I didn't even see Franco move. In one fluid motion, he had his left hand on my shoulder and his body between me and the alley. He moved me 2 steps to the right, behind the relative safety of a steel grease trap. His body was a solid wall of muscle and expensive wool. "Get back," he commanded, his voice a low growl. From the street, I heard a new sound, the rumble of a powerful engine turning over. A black sedan, sitting across the parking lot with its lights off, suddenly flashed its high beams, illuminating the 2 drunks like terrified animals. The car just sat there, engine idling, a threat. Were they with Baresi, or watching him? The 2 men scrambled, falling over each other to get away. "Cops, cops," one of them yelped. Though no siren sounded, they disappeared around the corner. Franco didn't relax. His eyes were fixed on the black sedan. He pulled his phone from his pocket. He didn't raise it to his ear, just spoke into it. "Mara, tag the plate, do not engage." He paused, listening to a reply I couldn't hear. "No, the locals were just noise. The sedan is the problem. Track them." He pocketed the phone. He turned to me. The adrenaline was making me shake so hard the jacket was slipping off my shoulders. "I'm taking you home." No, thank you. I'm fine. I'll walk." I tried to shrug the jacket off, but he pushed it back up. "I'm not asking, Lila." "I don't get in cars with strangers," I said, my voice trembling but defiant. He held my gaze. His eyes were dark, but the coldness was gone, replaced by a weary sort of patience. "I am a stranger, that's true. But right now, those men are a threat, and I'm the one who painted the target on you by interfering." He sighed, a faint puff of white mist in the cold air. "So don't think of me as a stranger. Think of me as a temporary wall. Get in the car." His car wasn't the sedan. It was parked in the next alley over, a dark, unassuming luxury car that looked more like a bank vault on wheels. The doors unlocked with a heavy, expensive thunk. The inside was black leather and smelled like his jacket. The silence was absolute once the door closed, sealing out the rain and the city. He drove with an unsettling economy of motion, no wasted movements. For several blocks, we drove in silence. "Tell me about Brent," he said finally, his eyes on the road. "What about him?" "Everything. How does he pay you?" "Cash, in an envelope, every Friday." "Under the table." "It's just how it's done," I defended weakly. "It's a diner." "Does he pay you the state minimum $11 an hour?" I looked down at my hands. "He pays 8, plus tips." "He's stealing from you," Franco stated. "What about the clock-out machine?" I think it's broken. Sometimes the hours on my envelope are wrong, shorter. When I asked him, he said I must have forgotten to punch in and he had to estimate. He gets angry if we ask for the paper slips." "Time clock fraud." Franco's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Overtime." I laughed, a bitter, dry sound. "Overtime, I worked a double last Tuesday, 16 hours straight. He gave me an extra $20 and told me not to mention it." Franco didn't respond. He navigated the turn onto my street. He picked up his phone again, holding it low. He typed a single, swift message with his thumb. I saw it before he locked the screen. "Activate the docklight file priority urgent." He pulled up in front of my building. It was a crumbling brick tenement, wedged between a pawn shop and a laundromat. The single street light that was supposed to illuminate the entrance had been broken for a month. The entryway was a pool of absolute darkness. And there was someone standing in it. Just a silhouette, a man, standing perfectly still, back in the shadows of the alcove, waiting. I gasped. my hand flying to the door handle. Before I could even pull it, Franco was out of the car. He moved faster than I thought possible. The driver's door shut with a soft whump, and he was on the sidewalk, standing between me and the doorway. He didn't look at the shadow. He looked at me, his body angled, protective. The figure in the doorway shifted, then stepped out into the rain. It was just old man Hemlock, from apartment 3B, waiting for his night shift cab. He pulled his hat down and shuffled past us, smelling of menthol. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, my body slumping in relief. Franco did not relax. He scanned the street, the rooftops, the dark alleys across the way. He was looking for the sedan, or for something else. He walked me to the heavy outer door, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. It wasn't a familiar touch. It was a guard's touch. Steering, protecting. I fumbled for my keys, my hands still shaking. Lila. I looked up. He was standing very close. I could feel the heat radiating from his chest. "Get inside," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Bolt the door, the top one and the bottom one." I nodded, unlocked the first lock, and pushed the door open. "I'll handle Brent," he said, "and I'll handle your friends." "I don't want anyone to get hurt," I whispered. Franco Baresi looked at me, and his expression was the most dangerous thing I had ever seen. "It's too late for that." I slipped inside, and as the heavy door wheezed shut, I heard the click of the deadbolt and the slide of the chain. I leaned against the cold metal, my heart hammering, the smell of cedar and steel still clinging to the jacket he had left on my shoulders. I climbed the 4 flights of stairs to my apartment, my legs trembling. The warmth of Franco's jacket was a heavy weight on my shoulders, a shield I didn't know how to carry. I fumbled with my keys, my hands still shaking from the encounter in the alley. The 2 deadbolts on my door, number 4B, felt flimsy. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. It was just one room, small and sparse, but it was mine. The kitchenette was clean, the single bed neatly made. My only luxury was the wide, rattling window that looked out over the Halcyon River. The water was black, churned to a gray froth by the wind, and the lights of the container port on the far bank blurred behind the sheeting rain. On the wall beside the window, a persistent leak from the apartment above had left a brown, sprawling stain, like a map of a country I would never see. I turned to close the door, and my breath caught in my throat. He was still there, Franco Baresi. He hadn't followed me up the stairs. He had taken the service elevator at the end of the hall. He was standing on the landing, not in my apartment, but just outside the threshold. He was respecting the line. The dim, flickering bulb in the hallway cast half his face in shadow. He was just watching me. "You have family here?" he asked. His voice was softer in the narrow hall, the sharp edges absorbed by the peeling wallpaper. "No," I said, my hand gripping the doorknob. "No one. Not in this city." I swallowed, the silence pressing in. "I have a younger brother. Back home, I send money. I call him every Sunday, 1 time a week." "Just him," he said. It wasn't a question. Just him. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, the air thick with things I couldn't name. My heart was a confused bird, beating against my ribs. Part of it was raw fear. This man was the Orpheum Syndicate. He was the shadow that Brent Hollow was afraid of. He was danger, wrapped in a perfect gray suit. He was the reason a black sedan was hunting the streets. He was everything I had spent my life trying to avoid. But he was also the man who had stopped the laughter. He was the one who had caught the coin. I realized he hadn't asked for my phone number. He hadn't asked if I was single. He hadn't even asked for my address. He'd just known. He just looked at me, his gaze sweeping my small, clean room in one quick, assessing glance. Then his eyes settled back on me. "Are you safe in here?" he asked. It was the question that broke me. Not "are you okay?" Not "do you feel better?" But "are you safe?" A question of locks and walls and the immediate, physical world. "Yes," I whispered. "The locks are good." His eyes held mine. I saw his chest rise and fall in a single, slow breath. The rhythm changed. Or maybe mine did, shifting to match his. He was still standing in the drafty hallway. The rain from the landing's broken window was misting the shoulder of his suit. He was letting himself get wet. The survival instinct in me, the one that got me through every shift at the docklight, screamed at me to shut the door, to slide the 2 bolts and wedge my chair under the knob. But the part of me that had been cold for so long, the part that still felt the sting of that quarter on my skin, that part won. "You're getting wet," I said. My voice was hoarse. "You should come in, just for a minute, to get out of the rain." I had to set a boundary, for my sake, and his. "I can make you a cup of hot tea, but then you have to leave." He searched my face, as if looking for a trap or a lie. He found neither. He gave a single, short nod. He stepped over the threshold. The room shrank by half. His presence was overwhelming. He wasn't tall, but he was solid, and he moved with a deliberate grace that took up all the oxygen. He didn't look around, judging the worn furniture or the rust stain. He simply moved to the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back, waiting. "You can sit," I stammered, pointing to the small, frayed love seat by the window. He sat. I turned to the kitchenette, my hands fumbling with the electric kettle. I grabbed 2 mismatched mugs, the ones I'd bought for 50 cents at the church thrift store. When I turned back, he had taken off his suit jacket and folded it neatly beside him. He was wearing dark suspenders over a stark white shirt. He looked like something from a different era. I brought the tea over. It was only cheap peppermint, but the apartment filled with the sharp, clean smell. I sat on the opposite cushion, leaving a careful handspan of distance between us. He didn't drink. He just held the mug, letting the steam warm his face. His eyes were on my hand, the one I had wrapped around my own mug. "Your wrist," he said. I looked down. The burn from the coffee was an angry red welt. The cut from the glass shard in the alley was a thin red line across my knuckles. He set his mug on the floor. He reached across the small space. He didn't grab my hand. He just held his out, palm up, an offering, a request. My breath hitched. I hesitated, then slowly, I placed my injured hand in his. His skin was warm, his fingers were strong, and I was surprised to feel the roughness of calluses on his palm. This was not the hand of a man who only sat in offices. His grip was impossibly gentle. He turned my hand over, his thumb brushing the cut on my knuckle. Then he focused on the burn, the angry red circle from Henderson's coin. He lifted my wrist, his dark eyes fixed on the injury. And he blew on it. A soft, steady, cool breath. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a caress. It was first aid. It was the simple, practical gesture of a parent to a child, a gesture so devoid of threat, so full of simple care that it undid me completely. I watched the dark crown of his head, my throat tightening, the knot of fear and anger that had been lodged in my chest since 6 p.m., the knot that had been there for months. It just dissolved. My shoulders, which I hadn't realized were hiked up to my ears, finally dropped. I let out a breath I had been holding all day. The moment stretched, suspended in time. The only sounds were the rain on the glass and the quiet rush of his breath on my skin. It felt like the world had slowed down, the frantic pace of Port Halcyon fading to a dull hum. He gently placed my hand back on my knee. He picked up his tea. "My grandfather ran a fish stall," he said, his voice quiet, conversational, "at the old Turn Market before the city tore it down for condos." I looked at him, confused by the sudden confession. "I worked for him," he continued as, staring into his mug. "From the time I was 12 years old, 6 days a week, before school, after school, I served people, I gutted fish, I packed them in ice." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. My English was bad. My accent was thick. We lived on the docks, the rich kids, the college kids who came down for a thrill. They thought it was funny. They'd make me repeat the names of the fish. "Say it again, fish boy." "Say cod." They'd throw pennies at my feet to watch me bend over and pick them up. He set the mug down, his voice losing its warmth, hardening again. I know the sound of that kind of laughter, Lila, and I know what it costs to stand there and swallow it. A single tear, the one I had refused to shed in the diner, escaped. It slid, hot and sudden, down my cold cheek. He saw it. He didn't move to wipe it away. He didn't comment. He just let me have the moment. "Brent Hollow will never laugh at you again," and he said. He stood up. The spell was broken. He was Franco Baresi again, the man from the Orpheum Syndicate. He picked up his jacket. He walked to my door. "You should go," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I will." He put his hand on the doorknob, then paused. He looked back at me, his face half-shadowed. "All business. In 12 hours, he stated, his voice flat and cold as the river. "That diner will not have the right to be open. They will learn very quickly what happens when you treat human beings like they are garbage." He opened the door, glanced once into the empty hallway, and was gone. I didn't hear a sound. I scrambled to the door, sliding both bolts home. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood, my body trembling. I was caught between an overwhelming sense of relief and a terrifying, bone-deep fear. I wanted to believe him. I was terrified of what it meant if I did. This kind of protection always had a price. I went to the window. The street below was empty. His car was gone. My phone, resting on the counter, vibrated once, a sharp, insistent buzz. I picked it up, a new message. The sender was listed only as unknown. There were no words, just an attachment. I tapped it, and an image filled my screen. It was a photograph of a page from Brent's accounting ledger, the one he kept locked under the bar. It was a list of employee names. I saw mine. I saw Maria's, the morning cook. I saw Sal's, the dishwasher. Next to our names were 2 columns, hours logged and hours paid. The numbers were not the same. They were not even close. Next to my name, for the 16-hour double shift I'd worked on Tuesday, Brent had logged 8. And someone, with a thick yellow highlighter, had drawn a precise, angry line over every single discrepancy, over every stolen hour, over every single act of theft. The clock was ticking, 15 minutes past midnight. In an unmarked office building 5 blocks from the river, the Orpheum Syndicate's real weapons were wide awake. They called themselves the Ledger Fox team. They were not enforcers, they were auditors, data forensics specialists, and ex-journalists. At their head was Mara Quill, a woman with pale eyes and a mind that moved like a scalpel. Franco's message at 2 a.m. had not woken them. It had simply aimed them. "The Docklight file is live," Mara said, her voice quiet in the room of clicking keyboards. "I want everything. We have his shadow ledger. Now I want the architecture of his misery." They moved through the digital entrails of Brent Hollow's life. They found the cached video files from a former cook's cloud storage, showing glistening rodent droppings on sacks of flour, time-stamped from 2 days ago. They found the scanned copies of employment contracts forgeries, with signatures that didn't match the names. They found the hidden payroll spreadsheet, the one I had seen a picture of, documenting thousands of dollars in stolen wages, a systemic theft going back 3 years. They found the metadata on the diner's security camera feed, which showed the video from the kitchen mysteriously looped every 10 minutes. 2:05 in the morning. Mara finished drafting the email. It was a masterpiece of anonymous concern. It was addressed to a mid-level director at the Port Halcyon Urban Commerce Compliance Bureau, a man the Orpheum Syndicate knew was terrified of scandal. The subject line read, "Anonymous tip, imminent health and safety risk at Docklight Grill, 14 Dock Street." The body was simple, bullet-pointed evidence, the wage theft spreadsheet, a link to the rodent video, a screenshot of the looping security feed, no accusations, just data. She sent it from an encrypted throwaway address. But the genius was in the carbon copy. She CC'd 2 other addresses. The first was the public inbox for the Port Halcyon Restaurant Association, a group of Brent's peers who would see his name tied to vermin and wage theft. The second was the anonymous tip line for Signal 7, the city's most aggressive independent news blog. Mara hit send. The first domino had fallen. 3:40 in the morning. Mara's personal phone buzzed, a restricted number. She answered, "Yes." "You looking into the docklight?" The voice was gravelly, nervous, a former delivery driver. One Mara's team had on a list of disgruntled ex-employees. "The guy, Brent, you need to know. He locks the fire escape." Mara went still. "Why?" "To keep customers from dining and dashing." The driver spat. "He says it cuts into his profit. He uses a chain and a padlock every night from 7 p.m. until close." This changed everything. This was no longer just a financial crime. This was negligent homicide waiting to happen. "Do you have proof?" Mara asked, her voice cold steel. "Sent it to your secure drop 2 minutes ago." Mara clicked on her terminal. A new image file. It was a photograph, grainy, taken in the dark alley behind the diner. It showed the red panic bar of the fire door, and wrapped around it, securing it to a wall pipe, was a heavy, padlocked chain. 4:10 in the morning. Franco Baresi stood by the window of his high-rise apartment, looking down at the same black river I saw from my window, just from a much greater height. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. His phone lit up with the image of the chain. He didn't swear. He didn't react. He simply turned, walked to his antique mahogany desk, and picked up a pen. He signed a single document. It was a termination of contract order. At 4:15 a.m., the night manager at Halcyon Marine Imports, the city's largest seafood distributor and a Quiet Orpheum subsidiary, received an automated alert. The Docklight Grill, account number 472, was to be placed on immediate and permanent suspension, effective immediately. The truck scheduled to deliver 70 pounds of fresh clams, cod, and oysters to the diner at 6 a.m. was rerouted. The logistics domino had fallen. 5:55 in the morning. As the first gray light began to break over the container cranes, a team of 3 Orpheum lawyers, fresh-shaven and wearing their sharpest suits, filed an emergency petition with the city's night court. They didn't use the health code violations. They didn't use the wage theft. They used the chain. The petition, citing the photographic evidence of a blocked fire exit in a commercial dining establishment, demanded an immediate, emergency inspection based on imminent risk to the public. It was a legal checkmate. No city official would dare ignore a documented fire trap that had been emailed to the press. 7:30 in the morning. I was asleep, still in my clothes. Franco's jacket pulled over me like a blanket. I was dreaming of falling coins. I was woken by shouting from the street. I ran to my window and looked down. 3 white vans with the official crest of the Urban Commerce Compliance Bureau were parked at skewed angles in front of the Docklight Grill. Not one inspector, but a full team of 12. And just pulling up behind them was a dark blue van with a satellite dish on top. The logo on the side was a stark, white 7. Signal 7 was here. Brent Hollow burst out of the diner's front door. His hair was uncombed, and his white manager's shirt was untucked, stained with yellow from a fresh egg. He was trying to laugh, a high, panicked sound. "Hey, fellas, what's all this? You're blocking my morning rush." The lead inspector, a severe-looking woman with a clipboard, just held up a piece of paper. "Mr. Hollow, we have an emergency order to inspect these premises. Immediately. Step aside." "Inspect I'm A-rated." Brent's eyes darted to the news camera, and his panic escalated. He fumbled for his phone. "You can't do this. I'm calling my boss. I'm calling Mr. Aris." He jammed the phone to his ear. "Mr. Aris, pick up. They're here. The inspectors are here. And the news. Pick up the phone." 8:10 in the morning. The lead inspector was already in the kitchen. She took one look at the sacks of flour, pulled a flashlight from her belt, and shone it into the dark recesses. Brent was sputtering. "This is harassment. I'll have your jobs." A second inspector was at the front counter. "Sir, I need to see your business license and your point-of-sale system records." Fine, Brent stormed behind the bar. "You want to see? I'll show you." He slammed his hand on the touchscreen of the cash register to ring up a $9 coffee for the inspector. The screen flickered, then it went blue. White text appeared in the center. "Service terminated. Violation of Terms, Section 4. B. Financial malfeasance. Please contact your provider. Brent stared at it. He jabbed the screen with his finger. Once. Twice. Nothing. The digital provider, another quiet Orpheum holding, had legally and contractually severed his ability to even conduct a transaction. The diner was paralyzed. What did you do?" he whispered, looking at the inspectors. They were already putting bright orange violation stickers on the coolers. 8:30 in the morning. Across the street, half a block down, Franco Baresi stood in the morning drizzle. He was wearing a dark wool overcoat, his hands deep in his pockets. He just watched. He watched the inspectors carry out bags of contaminated food. He watched Brent slide down the wall, his phone clutched in his hand, his face the color of spoiled milk. A young reporter from the Signal 7 crew, a woman known for digging, spotted him. She must have recognized him from old courthouse photos. She broke away from the main scene and ran over, her microphone held out. "Mr. Baresi, Franco Baresi," she said, breathless. This chaos. This looks like your handiwork. Do you have any comment on the closure of the Docklight Grill?" Franco didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the diner, on the orange stickers plastering the front window. He watched as they pulled the heavy chain from the fire escape and held it up for the camera. He turned his head slightly, just enough to speak into her microphone. His voice was calm, almost bored. "Dignity is a cost of business," he said, "not a tip." He turned, and without another word, walked away, disappearing into the returning rain. I couldn't sleep. After Franco's reporter soundbite, my phone had been vibrating with alerts from the Signal 7 blog, each one a new nail in the Docklight's coffin. I watched the sun climb over the river, feeling like I was a ghost haunting my own life. At 9 in the morning, a thick, cream-colored envelope was slid under my door, not mailed, hand-delivered. My name was written on the front in sharp, black ink. Inside, there was no letter, just an embossed card. "The Beacon's Wharf Culinary Fair cordially invites Lila Navarre to present at the New Voices of Halcyon Pavilion." It was today, now, in 2 hours. My heart stopped. This was the fair, the one I read about in the free papers, the one I dreamed of just attending, let alone cooking at. The New Voices Pavilion was where young chefs were discovered. It was the grant I'd been rejected from, but bigger. I had been a ghost a second ago. Now I was vibrating. How? Then I saw the small, printed line at the bottom. "Your station setup, and all ingredient costs have been sponsored by a private grant from the Orpheum Community Fund." Orpheum, Franco, this wasn't a rescue, it was a relocation. He hadn't just closed one door, he was standing in front of another one, holding it wide open. I was terrified. I was furious. And I was. God help me. Hopeful. I had 2 hours. I grabbed my bag, took the $20 bill I'd hidden in my shoe, and ran to the market. 2 hours later, I was standing behind a gleaming stainless steel prep station under a white tent. The air smelled of wood smoke, roasting garlic, and the sharp brine of the sea. The fair was packed, a loud, joyful river of people flowing along the wharf. My little booth was tucked away in a corner, but people were stopping. I wasn't making anything fancy. I was making a repas de maïz, my grandmother's recipe, a simple corn porridge from home, sweet and savory, with a dash of coconut milk and a sprinkle of sharp, aged cheese. It was the food of my childhood, the food of survival. My hands were shaking as I stirred the pot. I was an imposter. What was I doing here? "That smells like home." His voice, low and clean, cutting right through the noise of the crowd. I looked up. Franco Baresi was standing on the other side of my table. He was alone, no bodyguards, no entourage. He'd changed out of his suit and was wearing dark trousers and a simple black cashmere sweater. He looked devastatingly normal. He looked like a man, not a syndicate. He was holding something. "You'll stain your clothes," he said. He unfolded a pristine white, starch-stiff apron and embroidered on the chest in simple, elegant navy blue thread was a single letter N for Navarre. My throat was too tight to speak. I just stared at the letter. He walked around the side of the booth, into my small workspace. He stood behind me. I felt the heat of his body before he touched me. He didn't put his hands on my waist. He held the apron up, and my hands moved on their own, finding the strings and tying them behind my back. His fingers brushed mine for a fraction of a second. "And this is too much," I whispered, my back still to him. This is a bribe." "No," he said, his voice just behind my ear. "It's an apron. You're a chef. Chefs wear aprons." I turned around. We were standing a foot apart, enclosed in our own small world, the crowd a blur of color and sound around us. He looked at the bubbling pot. "May I?" I nodded. Grabbing a small paper cup, I ladled a scoop of the thick, steaming porridge. The steam rose in a fragrant cloud, obscuring his face for a second. I handed it to him. He took it. He didn't eat. He just looked at me, his eyes searching mine. I had to ask. The question was burning my tongue. "What are you really doing to the docklight, Franco? The news said it was closed. All of this. What is it?" He didn't answer, just held my gaze. He raised his free hand, the one with the calluses. I thought he was going to touch my face, and I flinched, bracing for it. But he didn't. He used his thumb to wipe a smudge of cornmeal from my cheek, his touch so light it was barely there. It was over in a second. But my skin burned where he had touched me. His eyes were like magnets, pulling me in. I couldn't look away. I felt exposed, seen in a way I hadn't been since I left my island. "He chained a door. Lila," he said, his voice a gravelly whisper. "He locked human beings inside a fire trap for a few extra dollars. He let that hang in the air. Some things are not negotiable." I felt the truth of it settle in my bones. I looked at this dangerous, quiet man, and I did something I couldn't explain. I raised my hand, the one with the healing burn, and I placed it flat against his chest, over his heart. I wasn't being seductive. I was checking. I was grounding myself. Under my palm, his heart was a solid, steady, unbelievably calm rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. A lighthouse in a storm. He didn't move, didn't breathe. He just let me hold him. Let me feel the life inside him. I looked up into his dark eyes and nodded once. A silent, shared understanding, an agreement. He covered my hand with his warm, rough palm pressing my fingers against the soft wool of his sweater. Then he leaned in, his lips brushing the shell of my ear, the crowd, the music, the world had all disappeared. "I was watching you in the diner," he murmured, his breath warm against my skin. "Before it happened, you never bent. Those men were throwing garbage at you, and you stood straight. You didn't beg. You didn't cry. You just endured." His shoulders shifted, moving almost imperceptibly to block the cold wind that was whipping in off the water. "I don't like watching people like you endure things you shouldn't have to." A smile, the first real one in months, touched my lips. It felt foreign. "So you bring the whole building down?" "I bring down the part that's rotten," he said, pulling back, but his hand was still covering mine, trapping it against his chest. He finally took a bite of the porridge. His eyes closed for just a second. "My God," he breathed. That's incredible." "It's just corn," I said, my face hot. "It's not just corn." He let go of my hand to point at the pot with his spoon. "It's warm. It's real. It's like you." He finished the cup. We both reached to put the empty container on the small side table at the same time. Our hands collided, fingers laced. His hand, which had been so gentle, suddenly gripped mine, not hard, just fully. A complete, possessive, warm hold. It wasn't polite, it wasn't an accident, it was a choice. A current passed between us, sharp and electric, making the hairs on my arms stand up. We stood there for 3, 4, 5 seconds, our hands tangled together, the world rushing by just feet away. Then, as if on cue, the sky opened up. It wasn't a drizzle, it was a downpour. The The wind ripped at the tent, and a cold sheet of rain swept in sideways. People screamed and ran for cover. Franco reacted instantly. He let go of my hand, grabbed his heavy wool overcoat from where he'd hung it, and threw it over my shoulders. Pulling the hood up over my head, it enveloped me, smelling of him, of cedar and cold steel and safety. "The pot!" I yelled, trying to save my food. "Leave it," he commanded. He put his arm around my back, not my waist, and propelled me out of the booth, into the chaos. He guided me through the running crowd, his body a shield against the wind and the driving rain, and steered me into the deep, dry awning of an old brick warehouse. We stood there, panting, pressed against the brick wall. The rain fell in a solid gray curtain, just inches from our faces. The world was a roar of water. We were trapped, just the two of us, in a pocket of sudden, profound silence. He was close. So close I could see the individual drops of rain on his eyelashes. His arm was still around my back, his hand resting on my side, burning a hole through the apron in my shirt. Our breathing synced, inhale, exhale. The space between us was charged, thick with everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. I had to know what this was, what he was. I looked up at him, my voice a whisper beneath the sound of the storm. If I say stop, you stop. Franco Baresi didn't look away. His dark eyes were fixed on mine, and in them I saw no games, no lies, just the cold, hard truth of his world. He nodded. Once. "Every boundary you have, Lila," he said, his voice a low vow, "is law." 10:45 in the morning. The rain was easing, but we were still huddled under the awning. Franco's coat was a heavy, warm tent around me. The reporter from Signal 7, the one who had confronted Franco earlier, suddenly reappeared, her phone held out like a weapon. She was looking at me. "Miss Navar Lila." "It's official," she said, her voice sharp with adrenaline. "The Bureau of Commerce just updated the file. As of 10:45 a.m., the Docklight Grill's license is indefinitely suspended. They've cited imminent and severe risk to public safety. The doors are padlocked. Brent Hollow is out. You did this. How does it feel?" I flinched. Franco's hand, which had been resting on the wall beside my head, tensed. His shadow fell over me. I didn't, I stammered, twisting the fabric of his coat in my fists. The camera was on me, the bright, intrusive light. The reporter pushed, "He harassed you." "Right, the other staff members. We're hearing stories about wage theft, verbal abuse. Is that why you brought in the Orpheum Syndicate?" All my fear, all my anger, it swirled, and for a second I wanted to burn Brent to the ground, but I thought of Maria, the morning cook with 2 kids. I thought of Sal, the old dishwasher who barely spoke English. I pulled myself free of Franco's coat, stepping forward into the light, though my knees were knocking. I looked right into the camera. "I was not harassed," I said, my voice shaking but clear, my accent suddenly feeling like armor. Not a weakness. I was disrespected, and my coworkers were stolen from. I took a breath. I don't want anyone to lose their job. That's not what this is about. I just want a place to work that is fair. I want people to be paid what they are promised. I don't want to see anyone lose their way of life. Not if they know how to fix their mistakes. My voice cracked on the last word. A small silence fell. Then, from the side, a man in a baker's apron started clapping. Slowly, another vendor, a woman selling sausages, joined in. It was 11:30 in the morning. A small group began to form, maybe 10, then 15 people. They were other workers, porters, cooks, the people who set up the tents at dawn. One of them, a young man, ran to his truck and came back with a handful of cardboard signs, the ones he used for menu specials, and a thick black marker. He scrawled on one and held it up, "Pay on time." Another woman grabbed one, "Respect the voice." It was a small, clumsy, beautiful protest. They didn't stand with me, they stood around me. They were a shield. The reporter looked stunned, her focus shifting from a crime story to something else. Her phone buzzed again. A new alert. "Holy," she whispered, reading the screen. "It's 11:50. Halcyon Marine Imports just issued a public press release. They are permanently terminating all contracts with the Docklight Grill, citing moral and ethical violations brought to light by their management. Oh my God, other suppliers are following. The ripple effect, they're not just shut down. Miss Navarre, they're being erased." Far across town, in a car parked in a no-standing zone, Brent Hollow was watching the same Signal 7 feed on his phone. He was watching me. He was watching the signs. He was watching his name be dragged through the digital mud. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely dial. The phone connected on the first ring. "Eris!" Brent choked out, his voice a wet, terrified sound. "It's me. It's Brent. They shut me down. The inspectors, the news. Baresi. It was Franco Baresi. He's here. He's with the girl." The voice on the other end was cold, like gravel packed in ice. "We know. Brent, we've been watching the news. You let a syndicate man into our business. You brought this heat to our door over a waitress." "It wasn't my fault," Brent shrieked, tears of self-pity rolling down his face. She provoked me. You have to fix this. Aris, the Cabal has to fix this. Your name is on the lease." "The Cabal," the voice said, dangerously soft, "does not fix messes. Brent, we cut them off. The diner is a loss. You are a loss." "No, please, I can pay you back. I'll do anything. There was a long, cold pause. Brent could hear Aris breathing. "Anything, the problem isn't the diner anymore. Brent, the problem is the girl. She's the one Baresi cares about. She's the one on the news. She's the symbol." What do you want me to do?" Brent whimpered. "Not you. You're worthless," Aris spat. "But you're right. A message needs to be sent, back to Baresi. You don't poach on our territory." A new, harder voice came on the line. Aris was giving an order. "The girl. After the fair. She'll be alone. The old container yard. Pier A, it's deserted. Make it look like a mugging gone wrong. Send a message that no one, not even Orpheum, can touch the harbor side." Back at the fair, the small crowd was dispersing. The reporter had moved on, chasing the supplier's story. The rain had stopped. Franco guided me back under the awning, his face unreadable, his eyes fixed on something over my shoulder. His phone vibrated once in his pocket, a text. I watched him read it. It was the only time I'd ever seen him lose his composure. He didn't move, but the blood drained from his face. His stillness was absolute, the stillness of a predator that has just caught a new, unwelcome scent. The message was from Mara. "Cabal of Harborside is active. Target you. Lure Lila Navarre. Location Pier a container yard. Plan abduction. Recommendation full extraction, immediate." He looked at me. His eyes were black, deep, and full of a cold fury I had not seen before. He typed a reply with one thumb, his movements sharp and precise. "Negative on full extraction. Too loud, I'll be the bait. You be the net. No civilian casualties. Priority clean extraction. My signal." He put the phone away. "Lila," he started, his voice strained. But before he could finish, my own phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I answered, my heart suddenly pounding. "Hello?" "Miss Lila Navarre." The voice was professional, friendly. "My name is Tim Jenkins. I'm a reporter with the Port Halcyon Chronicle. I saw your statement at the fair. Incredibly brave, incredibly powerful." "Oh," I said, flattered, glancing at Franco. "Thank you. Listen, Miss Navarre, the reason I'm calling, I have some information I think you need to see about Brent Hollow and his partners. It seems the wage theft goes much, much deeper. It involves other businesses on the wharf. I have documents, but I can't. I can't be seen in public. My editor doesn't even know I'm on this. Could you meet me? It's sensitive." A cold dread, heavier than the rain, settled in my stomach. "Meet you where?" "The old container yard, down at Pier A. It's quiet. We can talk. Say, in 1 hour. I looked at Franco, and he was watching me, his jaw so tight I thought it might break. He knew. I remembered the unknown number that had sent me the ledger. I remembered Franco's warning. This was too fast. The location was too isolated. My mind raced. This was a trap. They were using my voice, my newfound bravery, against me. Yes, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I can be there. 1 hour. I hung up the phone. I immediately opened my text messages. I found the thread with the unknown sender. My fingers flew. Just got a call. A reporter named Tim Jenkins wants to meet at the pier a container yard in 1 hour. It feels wrong. I hit send. The world around us seemed to go quiet. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick, heavy, and electric. The sky had darkened to a deep, bruised purple gray. From across the river, a single, mournful foghorn blasted, the sound echoing off the water like a dire warning. I looked at Franco. The rain stopped. He didn't take his eyes off the dark horizon. No, he said, his voice a low rumble. It's just waiting. The pier, a container yard, was a graveyard of steel. The stacks of cargo containers rose up like rusted, multicolored skyscrapers, blotting out the bruised purple sky. The only light came from a few sodium lamps, high on humming poles, casting a diseased yellow-orange glow that made the wet pavement look like slick, jaundiced skin. The air smelled of diesel, cold iron, and the stagnant, low-tide stench of the river. I stood in the center of the yard, my sneakers soaked, Franco's heavy coat a target on my back. I told him I had to do this, that I had to see the reporter. He had simply nodded, his face a mask of stone, and said, "I will be close." I didn't know how close. A scuff of a boot on gravel. I turned. 2 figures detached themselves from the shadow of a massive blue container. They weren't walking, they were spreading out, flanking me. One was tall, built like a longshoreman. The other was smaller, wiry, and moved with a frantic, desperate energy I recognized. "Brent," I whispered. "You stupid bitch," he hissed, his voice cracking with a mix of terror and rage. He was wearing a dark hoodie, but there was no mistaking the hollowed-out eyes, the face of a man who had lost everything in the span of 6 hours. "You ruined me, you in that suit." I came to meet a reporter," I stammered, backing away. "There's no reporter." The tall one grunted, his voice a low rumble. He was enjoying this. "Just a message for your new boyfriend." My back hit the cold, corrugated steel of a container, trapped. My hand, scrambling against my leg, brushed against a loose piece of dunnage, a splintered 2x4 lying on the ground. My fingers closed around the wet, rough wood. It was a pathetic weapon, but it was all I had. I raised it, my knuckles white. "Just stay back," I warned, my voice shaking. Brent laughed, a high, unhinged sound. "Or what? You'll serve me a coffee." The tall man lunged. A sound cut the night. Not a siren, not a gunshot. It was the sound of a luxury car's tires rolling silently over wet asphalt. A black sedan, the same one from the alley, glided into the pool of yellow light. Its headlights were off. It just appeared. A shark rising from the deep. It stopped, cutting off the tall man's path. Before he could even react, the driver's side window lowered. A white plume of gas shot out with a violent, deafening hiss. It wasn't smoke. It was a cloud of carbon dioxide from a fire extinguisher, a blinding, choking blizzard of freezing mist that hit the tall man square in the face. He roared, stumbling back, his hands flying to his eyes. "I can't see, I can't breathe." The yard was chaos, but in that chaos, a new figure stepped out from the other side of the container, the side Brent thought was his escape route. It was Franco. He wasn't wearing an overcoat, just his black sweater and trousers. He was drenched from the rain, but he seemed not to notice. He had no gun in his hand. He just stood there, his hands loose at his sides, a pillar of absolute calm in the swirling CO2. He didn't look at Brent. He looked at the tall man, who was still rubbing his eyes. "Let her go," Franco said. His voice wasn't loud, but it was the only sound in the yard. "Go home. Forget you saw her. Forget this happened." The tall man, his eyes red and streaming, blinked. Trying to focus, he saw Franco, and his training or his stupidity took over. He snarled, pulling a 6-inch switchblade from his pocket. The blade snapped open with a lethal click. "Orpheum," the man spat. "Eris pays double for you." He lunged at Franco. He didn't make it 2 steps. The driver's door of the sedan opened, and Mara Quill emerged from the fog of her own making. She moved with a speed that defied logic. She didn't block the knife. She moved inside the man's reach, her hand grabbing his wrist, the one holding the blade. Her other hand clamped onto his elbow. She pivoted. There was a sound, a wet, sickening pop, like a thick branch snapping. The man screamed, a high, thin sound that was cut off as his knees buckled. The knife clattered, useless, onto the pavement. Mara hadn't just disarmed him, she had shattered his elbow and wrist in a single, precise, controlling motion. It all happened in the space of 3 heartbeats. I stared, my wooden club falling from my numb fingers. I stumbled backward, my legs giving out. Before I could fall, an arm like a steel beam wrapped around my waist. Franco was there. He had moved from his position, ignoring the 2 men, his entire focus on me. He pulled me against his side, his body a solid, warm wall, shielding me from the scene. "Are you hurt anywhere?" he asked, his voice a low, urgent rumble, meant only for me. His hands were on my arms, his grip firm, checking. "No, Are you hurt?" he asked again, his eyes scanning my face, my neck, my hands. "No, Franco, I'm fine, I'm okay." He looked at me for 1 more second, then pulled me tighter, his head turning back to the yard. "Are you hurt anywhere?" he whispered a 3rd time, almost to himself, his chin brushing the top of my hair. Brent Hollow was frozen, his mouth open, staring at his backup, who was now writhing on the ground. He looked at Mara, who was calmly retrieving the knife. He looked at Franco, who was holding me. Brent ran. He scrambled, crab-walked backward, then turned and bolted, disappearing into the black maze of containers, his footsteps echoing wildly. Mara took a step to follow. "Let him go," Franco ordered. Mara stopped instantly. She turned to the man on the ground, who was cradling his ruined arm. "Stay down," she advised, her voice flat. Far in the distance, a new sound, a different kind of siren, not the police, but the high-low whoop of the Port Halcyon Harbor Patrol, Franco's cleanup crew, the fictional safe harbor unit. "Brent got away," I whispered, my teeth chattering. Franco didn't even look in the direction Brent had fled. He kept his eyes on me, his hand moving to my cheek. "The real price," he said, his voice soft, "will come from the courts and the ledgers. His running is just a confession. He's finished." The sirens grew closer. 2 harbor patrol vans swung into the yard, their blue lights flashing, cutting through the yellow fog. Men in dark utility uniforms jumped out, their movements crisp and professional. They surrounded the injured man, one of them already applying medical ties. I started to shake. The adrenaline was gone, and the cold, wet reality crashed in. My legs trembled, the sound of the man's arm breaking. The click of the knife. Brent's face. Tears welled, hot and fast, blurring the flashing blue lights. Franco turned me away from the scene. He unbuttoned his black sweater, the one I had put my hand on, the one that was soaked with rain. He pulled it off in one motion, leaving him in just a white t-shirt in the freezing cold. He didn't shiver. He wrapped the warm, heavy cashmere around my shoulders, pulling it tight. "It's over," he said. He guided me into the deep shadow of a container, away from the lights, away from the men, away from everything. We just stood there, hidden from the world. The sounds of the cleanup faded. My breathing was ragged, his was steady. My heart was a panicked bird, his was the slow, sure beat I had felt earlier. I was safe. I was alive. I turned my face into his chest. into the thin cotton of his shirt, breathing in the scent of him. My hand, the one with the healing burn, found his. I didn't just touch it. I laced my fingers through his, my grip desperate, tight. It was my choice. Franco's hand responded, his fingers closing around mine, engulfing my hand in a grip that was solid, possessive, and promised, without a single word, that no one would ever touch me again. Mara drove us back. I do not remember the ride. I just remember the silence in the car, the rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers, and the solid, unyielding pressure of Franco's hand holding mine. He did not let go, not once. When we arrived, he guided me out of the car. He had retrieved his heavy wool overcoat from Mara's trunk, and he held it draped over his arm, a silent, dark shield. I fumbled with the locks to my building, my fingers numb and stupid. He did not take the keys from me. He just waited, his body a solid presence at my back, blocking the street, blocking the world. We climbed the 4 flights of stairs. The hallway light on my floor was still flickering its sickly yellow. My apartment door, number 4B, seemed impossibly flimsy. I unlocked the 2 bolts and pushed it open. The room was just as I had left it. Small, quiet. I had left a candle burning, a cheap one that smelled of cinnamon and apples. The rain, which had returned, was a steady, streaming curtain against the black glass of my window. The room was dim, a tiny sanctuary. I stepped inside, still wrapped in his sweater, my own clothes damp and cold underneath. I turned. Franco was standing in the doorway. He did not cross the threshold. He stood on the worn, dirty linoleum of the hall, his hand resting on the doorframe. He was just a silhouette in his white t-shirt, his hair soaked, his body tense. He was waiting for permission. He looked at me, his eyes dark and unreadable in the shadows. He was not asking to come in. He was asking something else. "Do you want me to stay?" he asked, his voice low, rough from the cold. "Until the fear is gone." The fear was a living thing inside me, a cold, sharp-edged animal pacing in my chest. The thought of him leaving, of that door closing and me being alone with the memory of Brent's face and the pop of that man's arm was unbearable. I could not speak. I just nodded. He stepped inside. He closed the door behind him, and the sound of the deadbolt sliding home was the loudest, most final sound I had ever heard. He locked the second one, the chain. He did not turn on the main light. He just stood in the small entryway, dripping onto my floor, his presence filling the room. "You are cold," I whispered. I unwrapped his sweater. "You should take this back." "No," he said, his hand stopping mine. "Keep it. Go. Change. Get warm." I did as I was told. I went into the tiny bathroom, my body moving on autopilot. I peeled off my damp clothes, my skin clammy. I saw the bruise on my arm from where I had hit the container. I pulled on my oldest, softest pajamas, a pair of worn flannel pants and a long-sleeved t-shirt. It was all I had. When I came out, he was standing by the window, looking out at the black river. He had taken off his soaked t-shirt. It was hanging neatly over the back of my only chair. His back was to me. I saw the map of his muscles, the way his shoulders tensed. He was powerfully built, his skin gleaming in the dim candlelight. He was wearing a simple white undershirt, still dry. He had used a dish towel to dry his hair. He heard me and turned. He was holding his heavy overcoat. We did not speak. The space was too fragile for words. He sank to the floor, his back against the wall, right by the window. He sat on the worn, thin carpet, making himself smaller, less threatening. He looked at the floor, then patted the space beside him. I went. I sat down next to him, close, but not touching. I pulled my knees to my chest. The rain streamed down the glass, inches from my shoulder. We just sat, listening to it. My body was still vibrating with adrenaline. A tremor started in my hands. I clasped them, trying to make it stop. He saw. He did not say anything. He just shifted, his solid, warm shoulder pressing against mine. It was an anchor. I leaned into him. The tremor slowed. I rested my head on his shoulder. It was solid as a rock, and I could feel the heat of him, even through his shirt and my own. I focused on his breathing. Inhale. A slow, controlled, quiet sound. Exhale. I matched it. Inhale. Exhale. My own ragged breaths began to deepen, to sync with his. The cold, sharp animal in my chest finally lay down, its claws retracting. We sat like that for a long time, an hour, maybe more. The candle burned low, the scent of cinnamon filling the air. Finally, I lifted my head. I had to see his face. I turned, and he turned to meet me. We were closer than I realized. His face was inches from mine. In the dim, flickering light, the hard edges of his features were softened. The danger was still there, but it was banked, held in check. His eyes were not cold. They were full of a dark, quiet intensity, focused entirely on me. "Thank you," I whispered. My voice was thick. He just nodded, his gaze dropping to my lips, then rising back to my eyes. The gratitude I felt was real, but it was tangled with something else, something new and warm and terrifyingly powerful. It was desire. It was not just that he had saved me. It was that he had seen me. He had heard me. He had respected me. I did it without thinking. It was an instinct, like breathing. I raised my hand, the one that was not shaking anymore. I lifted it to his face. He did not flinch, but I saw his jaw tighten. My fingers were trembling as they touched the rough stubble on his jawline. I traced the hard bone, a silent question. He did not move. He did not pull away. He did not lean in. He just held perfectly still. His eyes locked on mine, and in their depths, I saw his own question, clear as any spoken word. "Are you sure?" I gave him his answer. I leaned in. The kiss was slow. It was not a collision. It was a discovery. His lips were firm, cool from the rain, and they met mine with a hesitant, unbelievable gentleness. There was no demand, no pressure. It was a question, and I answered it by pressing closer. My hand, the one on his jaw, slid up, my fingers tangling in his still damp hair at his temple. My other hand found his shoulder, then his neck, and finally, my fingers slipped just inside the collar of his undershirt. I felt the pulse there, the heavy, steady thump, thump, thump of his heart, beating strong and vital against my skin. It was the calmest pulse in the world, and it was racing. His hands, which had been braced on the floor, came up. One hand settled on my back, between my shoulder blades. It was a solid, warm pressure. It was support. He was not pulling me closer. He was just holding me, anchoring me. His other hand came to my waist, his thumb stroking the flannel, a small, soothing circle. It was a deep, safe exploration. It was the taste of him, the feel of his strength held in perfect, careful check. It was the knowledge that my single word, stop, would end it all. And that knowledge was what made me want to continue. We whispered things, small, broken fragments of truth in the dark. "What is your favorite food?" I murmured against his lips. "When you are not this." "Pasta," he breathed back. "My grandmother's, with simple tomato sauce." He kissed my forehead. "What place do you want to see, the real place, not the one on your wall?" "The ocean," I said, my eyes closed. "The real one, blue, not gray." He pulled back, just enough to look at me. His eyes were dark, serious, the promise he had made under the awning. He repeated it, like an oath. "If you want me to stop, Lila, you say the word. That is the rule, always." "I know," I whispered. "I do not want you to stop." I pulled back then, not to end it, but to breathe. I rested my forehead against his. My nose brushed his cheek. A small, involuntary laugh, a bubble of pure, impossible relief escaped me. He smiled. I felt the muscles in his cheek move. He gently eased me back, so I was leaning against the wall. He stood up in one fluid motion. For a second, I thought he was leaving, but he just picked up his heavy wool overcoat. He did not put it on. He unfolded it and draped it over my legs, covering me from my waist to my feet. It was impossibly heavy, impossibly warm. Intimacy bloomed in that small, quiet gesture. It was more profound than the kiss. It was an act of pure, uncomplicated care. This was not a wildfire. This was fire in glass. It was contained, powerful, and clear. It was two people, scarred and wary, learning how to sit next to each other in the dark without setting the whole room ablaze. We were just learning how to be warm, without getting burned. He sat back down, closer this time. I leaned my head on his shoulder again. He wrapped his arm around me, pulling me against his side. I was covered in his sweater, his coat, and cocooned by his arm. The fear was gone. I do not know when I fell asleep. I just know that the sound of the rain and the steady rhythm of his breathing was the safest sound I had ever known. Just before I drifted off completely, I heard him whisper, his voice a low rumble against my ear. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow, justice speaks in numbers." I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the floor. The gray light of morning was pressing against the window. I was stiff, still on the floor, covered in Franco's overcoat. He was gone. The apartment was empty, but it smelled of him cedar, wool, and something clean. His white t-shirt was gone from the chair. His sweater was still wrapped around my shoulders. He had left while I slept. A cold flicker of panic hit me. Had it been a dream? No. My phone buzzed again. A text from the unknown number. "Turn on Signal 7 now." I scrambled for my laptop, my fingers fumbling. I pulled up the live stream. The screen was filled with the interior of a sterile, wood-paneled room. The seal of the city of Port Halcyon was on the wall. A chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Live Emergency Hearing, City Business Licensing Commission." The camera zoomed in on a man sitting at a witness table, Brent Hollow. He was wearing the same stained shirt from yesterday, his face a ruin of gray stubble and terror. A lawyer in a cheap suit was whispering frantically in his ear. The time on the screen read 11:55 a.m. "Mr. Hollow," a commissioner was saying, her voice amplified by a microphone. "We have reviewed the evidence submitted by the Bureau of Commerce and a concerned citizens group, and frankly, in 20 years on this board, I have never seen such a flagrant disregard for human life." "It's a mistake," Brent shrieked, his voice cracking. "It's a setup. This is a corporate conspiracy." "A conspiracy, mister?" Hollow, the commissioner asked, her voice dangerously smooth. "Let's review. Exhibit A, the wage ledgers provided by an independent labor union, showing systemic theft from your employees, totaling over $40,000 in the last year alone." "Forgeries," Brent yelled. "Exhibit B, a photograph, time-stamped, of your establishment's primary fire exit, chained and padlocked during business hours. Pest control. We had a rat problem. It was temporary." "And Exhibit C," the commissioner said, "which I find the most disturbing." She nodded to a technician. A massive screen behind her lit up. It was a video, but the colors were all wrong. Strange, ghostly shapes of red, yellow, and blue. "This, Mr. Hollow, is thermal imaging footage of your kitchen. Taken by inspectors at 8 o'clock yesterday morning. The red indicates extreme heat. Your grills are overloaded, running 20 degrees above safety limits. The blue, however, the blue is the problem." The image zoomed in on the seafood walk-in refrigerator. "Your refrigeration unit is running at 55 degrees Fahrenheit, 15 degrees above the legal maximum. This thermal data, cross-referenced with your supplier invoices, shows you were holding 70 pounds of raw shellfish in a cooler that was, for all intents and purposes, a bacterial incubator." Brent just stared, his mouth opening and closing. "You weren't just a fire trap, Mr. Hollow," the commissioner said, her voice like ice. "You were a ticking time bomb of food poisoning." She looked at the clock on the wall. "It is now 12 o'clock, noon. This commission moves to an immediate vote, all in favor of the permanent and immediate revocation of the business license for Docklight Grill, Incorporated, on the grounds of immediate and severe public threat." Every hand on the panel shot up. "Motion passes," the commissioner said. "The business license is revoked, effective immediately. Economic Crimes Unit will be dispatched to seal the premises and seize all assets for forfeiture against the unpaid wages. The camera cut to a live shot outside the docklight. 2 police cars were already there. Men in dark blue windbreakers with PCEQ on the back were unspooling yellow "Do Not Cross" tape. A locksmith was drilling out the lock. Signal 7 was broadcasting the death of the diner, live to the entire city. My laptop chimed, a new text, not from unknown, a real number. Franco. "It's done. You don't have to go back there." I let out a breath I had been holding for 24 hours. Back at the hearing, Brent's lawyer was sputtering, "My client is just a manager. He answers to his partners. This is an overreach. The cabal of Harborside will not stand for this. We will sue the city." The name hung in the air. The cabal of Harborside. The room went silent. The commissioners looked at each other, a flicker of fear in their eyes. The cabal owned half the wharf. "The cabal," the commissioner asked, her bravado fading. "That's right," Zaun, the lawyer said, puffing up. "They hold the lease, and they are very, very unhappy with this proceeding." "Duly noted," a calm voice said from the back of the room. The camera panned. A man in a sharp $3,000 suit stood up. He was one of Franco's men, one of the lawyers from the morning's petition. "While the cabal is, of course, a respected city institution," the lawyer said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "I'm sure they would be distressed to know their name is attached to a business that locks in its workers and serves poisoned food. I imagine their political pressure will be somewhat diluted." He handed a file to the clerk. "Especially given the news that just broke this morning, it seems the Orpheum Community Fund has just given a $500,000 grant to the Port Halcyon Dock Workers Meal Program, ensuring hot lunches for every longshoreman on the cabal's territory for the next 3 years. It was a political execution. The cabal could not attack the city for closing a dangerous restaurant when their own workers were being fed by the very organization that exposed it. The public would crucify them. The lawyer for the cabal quietly sat down, his face pale. "Is there any public comment?" the commissioner asked, eager to move on. And I heard my own voice. Yes. I hadn't realized I'd done it. I had left my apartment and taken a cab to City Hall. I was standing at the public microphone at the back of the hearing room. I was still wearing Franco's black sweater. The Signal 7 camera swung around, the bright light blinding me. Miss Navarre," the commissioner said, shuffling her papers. "Please proceed." I looked at Brent. He was staring at me, his eyes dead. I felt a surge of sickness, not triumph. "I am not here to celebrate this," I said, my voice shaking, my accent thick in the microphone. "I am here for Maria, and for Sal, and for the other cooks and servers who just lost their jobs because one man was greedy." I turned to the commission. "You are seizing the assets. You are taking the money. That is good. But that money belongs to the workers first, before the city, before anyone." I took a deep breath. I demand that this commission set up a docklight transition fund, use that money to pay the back wages today, and use it to help the other workers find new, safe jobs. The room was silent. The reporter from Signal 7 was scribbling furiously. The head commissioner looked at me, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. "That is the most sensible thing I've heard all day, young lady. The commission will take that under advisement, and I suspect under public scrutiny. We will find a way to do exactly that." "She's lying," Brent suddenly screamed. He stood up, knocking his chair over. "She's with him. She's with Baresi. He set me up. He attacked my man last night. "Mr. Hollow," a deep voice said. 2 uniformed police officers had moved to stand behind him. "You are being detained for obstruction of an investigation. We have a warrant citing your attempts to destroy financial records last night." They grabbed his arms. Brent went wild. He fought, kicking, twisting, his eyes darting around the room, manic. Baresi, you bastard, show yourself, I know you're here. Show your face." They cuffed him. He was still screaming Franco's name as they dragged him, stumbling from the hearing room. He was right. Franco was there. I saw him. He was standing in the shadows of the alcove by the main exit, at the very back of the room. He was wearing his full suit again, charcoal gray. Perfect, and he'd been watching the entire time. As Brent was dragged past, their eyes met for a second. Brent's face crumpled. Franco's face was a mask of cold, indifferent granite. He watched the doors swing shut. He checked his watch. It was 12:15. He adjusted his cufflink. He calmly buttoned the middle button of his suit jacket, a small, final gesture. Then, without ever looking at me, he turned and walked out the door. The title was complete. The diner was shut down, 12 hours after the inspection, almost to the minute. I walked home. The city felt different, sharper. When I got back to my apartment, there was another envelope under my door. Not cream, plain white. Inside was a single piece of paper. It was a job offer. Head chef, Halcyon Community Kitchen. It was a new program, a training kitchen for immigrants and the unemployed, teaching high-end culinary skills. The salary was more than I had ever dreamed of. It was my future, handed to me on a piece of paper. I knew who it was from. The Halcyon Community Kitchen had Orpheum written all over it, an anonymous donation, a way to launder his influence. I picked up my phone. I typed in the number he had texted me from. I accept. I wrote, on one condition. You tell me who funds it. No more shadows. I want full transparency, or I walk. I hit send. My hand was not shaking. I thought the hearing was the end. I thought justice was the sound of a gavel and a license being revoked. For 2 days, I lived in the strange, quiet space of victory. I worked on the menu for the Halcyon Community Kitchen, sketching out lesson plans. I was waiting for Franco's reply to my text, my condition of transparency. The reply never came. Instead, the cabal of Harborside, wounded and furious, played its final, vicious card. It didn't start with a threat. It started on the Signal 7 comment boards, the dark corners of the city's internet. It was an anonymous post, then 2, then a dozen. By the 3rd day, it was a coordinated, paid-for smear campaign. The headlines were poison. Lila Navar, the Orpheum honey trap, Baresi's bait, how a fake waitress was used to steal the docklight. They had found a picture of me from the culinary fair, laughing, and twisted it into something ugly. They painted me as a moi nu, a willing puppet, a seductive plant used by Franco Baresi to start a wharf war. They weren't just attacking Franco's organization, they were attacking my integrity, my story, the one thing I had left that was truly mine. The fear was back, but this time it was different. It was cold, and it was sharp, and it was welded to a white-hot rage. I didn't call Franco. I called the Signal 7 reporter. You put me on the news when I was a victim, I said, my voice low and steady. Now you put me on when I am being called a liar. I want to go on air. Tonight, live. She didn't hesitate. 8 p.m., she said. It's our prime slot. Are you sure? Lila, they will come at you hard. Let them try, I said, and hung up. That night, I sat in the studio. The lights were 100 times hotter than the ones at the docklight. The cameras were 3 black, unblinking eyes, waiting to judge me. I was terrified. I was alone. Franco still hadn't answered my text. The host, the same reporter from the fair, leaned forward. Lila, welcome. You know what they are saying. They are calling you a plant, a conspirator, a liar. What is your response? I found the main camera, the one with the small red light. I did not see a lens. I saw the men in booth 4. I saw Brent. I saw the shadow of the cabal, hiding behind their money. My name is Lila Navar, I said. My voice was small, but it did not shake. My accent was clear. I am a cook. I am an immigrant. I am not a weapon. I told them my story, not the one they had invented, but the real one. They say I work for the Orpheum Syndicate. This is not true. I worked for Brent Hollow. He paid me $8 an hour. He stole my wages. He stole the wages of Maria, our morning cook. He stole from Sal, our dishwasher, and my voice grew stronger, filling the studio. When I was pushed, I was burned. When I complained, I was humiliated. When those men threw money at my feet, I was told to be quiet. The cabal of Harborside asks why I brought this trouble. I did not. Brent Hollow did. The cabal asks why I am a problem. I am not. Their problem is the chained fire door. Their problem is the poisoned seafood. They are not angry that a business was closed. They are angry that they got caught. As I spoke, the monitor behind the host flickered. The image skipped. A high-pitched whine filled the studio. "We seem to be having some technical difficulties," the host said, tapping her earpiece. "Stand by." Across town, in the dark, quiet office of the Ledger Fox team, Mara Quill watched her monitor dissolve into static. "They're attacking the broadcast server," she said calmly. Her fingers were a blur on her keyboard. A brute force denial of service attack. Pathetic and sloppy. She wasn't just defending the signal, she was tracing it. They're panicking. The attack is originating from a single IP. Triangulating. Got it. She looked at the map. Pier A, a warehouse. The same one they planned to use for your abduction. Franco Baresi stood by the window, watching the city lights. He had been listening to my voice on the studio feed. He had wanted the cabal to die a slow, legal death, choked by its own ledgers and lawsuits. Then, the smear campaign logo had flashed on the screen my face, manipulated, cheapened. "Sir," Mara said, "the legal case is solid. We can wait for the courts." Franco turned from the window. His face was carved from stone. The calm, patient man who had held my hand was gone. The man from the container yard was back. "They put her face on their garbage," he said, his voice a flat, dead calm. "They tried to silence her. End it tonight." Mara Quill smiled. "The safe harbor unit has been waiting for the green light, sir. I'll lead the breach myself." Back in the studio, the lights slammed back on. The signal was clear. I had not stopped talking. And I'm not ashamed of my accent," I was saying, my voice ringing with a fury I didn't know I possessed. "I am not ashamed of my job. I am not ashamed of the truth, but they should be ashamed of themselves." The host was staring at her monitor, her jaw slack. "Lila, I am just getting a report. This is breaking news. Right now." She turned to the camera, her professionalism cracking. "We are getting live feeds from our chopper. The Port Halcyon Safe Harbor Unit, in coordination with the Economic Crimes Unit, has just executed a raid on a warehouse on Pier A warehouse owned by a holding company, directly linked to the Harborside cabal." My heart stopped. The screen behind her split, showing a live, shaky, night vision video of the raid. Teams of uniformed officers were flooding into a dark building. The reports. The host's voice was breathless. "State they have seized. My God! They have seized servers containing evidence of systemic citywide labor racketeering, wage theft, extortion, illegal intimidation. This is the entire cabal operation." She looked at me, her eyes wide with a terrible, beautiful realization. "Lila, they didn't just attack the station. They launched a cyber attack while you were on the air, from the same building where they kept their criminal files. They just exposed themselves to the entire city. The final domino had fallen. The climax was not a gunshot, it was a server rack. I wasn't the bait, I was the spotlight. The show ended. The red lights on the cameras went dark. I just sat there, shaking, the heat of the lights suddenly unbearable. I walked off the set, down the dark, narrow hallway behind the studio. The adrenaline was gone, leaving a hollow, echoing silence. He was there. Franco was leaning against the far wall, just as he had at the hearing, hidden in the shadows. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket, just his vest and shirt sleeves. His tie loosened. He was watching me. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He just pushed himself off the wall and took 2 steps toward me. He held out his hand, palm up, an offering, a choice. I didn't hesitate. I walked into the space between us and placed my hand in his. His fingers laced through mine, his grip solid, absolute. He pulled me gently toward him until my shoes were touching his. His other hand came up, not to my waist, but to my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. "You did not waver," he whispered. His voice was rough. "You came." I breathed. He pulled me in. It was not a gentle hug. It was a collision. My arms wrapped around his waist, my hands gripping the fabric of his vest, holding on as if he were the only stable thing in the universe. I buried my face in his chest. His arms crushed me to him, one hand splayed wide across my back, the other cradling the back of my head, his fingers tangling in my hair. We stood there, in the dim, humming hallway, just breathing. My heart was a frantic drum against his ribs, and for the first time, his was hammering just as fast, a perfect chaotic rhythm matching mine. He pulled back, just enough for our foreheads to touch. Our eyes were closed. We were nose to nose, sharing the same air. "Orpheum is a shadow. Lila," he murmured, his voice thick. "It has to be. But you are the light. I will not be the one to cover you." I opened my eyes, looking into his. "The shadow needs to eat, Franco." I whispered, "I will cook dinner for the shadow, so it remembers what it feels like to be warm." His lips found mine. It was not the slow, safe discovery in my apartment. It was a promise. It was deep, and it was certain, and it was the taste of a future. It was the sound of two worlds colliding and finding, impossibly, that they fit. The Halcyon Community Kitchen opened 2 weeks later. The grand opening was loud, bright, and smelled of my corn porridge. The sign on the door was transparent, funded by the City Restoration Fund and the Navarre Labor Initiative. I was at the front of the room, in my new, crisp white chef's coat, the embroidered N proud on my chest. I was teaching my first class. My students were cooks, porters, and immigrants. "Today," I said, my voice ringing out, clear and strong, "we learned 2 things, how to make a perfect emulsion and how to read an employment contract so no one ever steals from you again." At the very back of the room, standing in the shadows by the door, a man in a simple black sweater watched. He was not prominent, he was not noticed. He just watched me laugh, watched me command the room, watched me shine. We did not choose a fairy tale. We chose the daily, difficult habit of kindness. We chose the work. And on the nights when the Port Halcyon wind was too cold, when the ghosts of the past felt too close, we would sit by the window in my apartment. His hand would find mine in the dark. We were just 2 people, learning, every day, how to love each other without causing harm. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please comment below and share your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give us extra support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.